Dr. Jaclynn Moskow is our guest today, and it's been quite a whirlwind 24 hours for her. Created a buzz in the poker world with her bombshell blog post at jaclynnmoskow.com and subsequent interview on the Poker Life podcast regarding her miserable experiences during a weekend of taping at Poker Night in America in Pittsburgh. Claims of sexual harassment and racism. Dr. Moskow, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Derek.
Wow, this has been crazy. You have sent Poker Twitter aflame these past 24 hours. We're going to talk about some of the reaction in a second. You outlined your case pretty good in the blog and again with Chicago Joey over the course of about 90 minutes. I'm wondering, do you want to recap, give us the gist of what happened, or do you want to talk about the reaction that's been on Twitter the past 24 hours?
Yeah, we can give a brief recap. I'm sure maybe some of your listeners want that. You know, I was invited to play on Poker Night in America by Nolan Dalla, and when I arrived in Pittsburgh, I was sort of immediately met with this overall sense that something was off, and the first words that were exchanged between myself and Todd Anderson, which is the show's creator and producer, he looked at me and he said, "Why are you here? Why are you here? Like, does Nolan have a thing for you?" Or something. That's the direct quote. And at that point, you know, I didn't know what to make of it, but as I say in my blog, it certainly foreshadowed things that occurred later without getting into too many of the details, because like you said, some people may have already listened to me on Chicago Joey's podcast or read my blog. You know, throughout my experience in Pittsburgh, I just felt like Todd Anderson was incredibly hostile towards me.
You got the sense that when you showed up being invited to play by Nolan Dalla, that all of a sudden you were greeted with, "What the hell are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here."
Correct. And yeah, and as a result of that, you know, I was on the show, I was off the show, I was on the show, and that happens a lot with the show. And I've said before in other interviews that's at the discretion of the producer, but that really isn't what this is about. The main issue, I guess, that is getting the most attention is the fact that when I approached Nolan at a bar a few nights after Todd had made his original statement to me, "Why are you here? What, does Nolan have a thing for you?" And let him know about that statement, his response was, "I do." And he followed that response with, "I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and hey, watch," and drew a small crowd around him, and then proceeded to put his head into my chest and move it around, and, you know, which I guess would legally be defined as sexual assault. And after that, let me know that he had given this toast, and that during the toast he was going to say something, quote, really disgusting about me, but that he had left it out, and specifically about the way I looked. And subsequent to that, there had been a secondary issue where someone on the show Chris Hansen, who's the on-screen host for the show, he had made a comment to me that the thing that made the show so great was that there were no Jews involved, as in no Jews at the top, like the production team. They're all from out in, you know, North Dakota. Todd Anderson, and you can look through the, you know, who's involved. That none of them were Jewish, and that in TV it's the norm and the standard for it to be run by Jews. And so when this comment got back around to Nolan, he said to me, you know, "I didn't know that you were Jewish, but somehow the fact that you're Jewish makes you even hotter." And he also, in that remark, made reference to the fact that normally he has really strong opinions about Jews in Israel, but somehow the fact that I'm Jewish makes me hotter. And so I felt that, you know, two anti-Semitic comments had been made to me, one by Chris Hansen, one by Nolan Dalla, and of course this incident with Nolan having stuck his head into my chest. And while I was at the bar in Pittsburgh, a man grabbed my ass. I didn't know who the man was, and later learned that he was a cameraman for the show, and I didn't know that for about a month. So I thought it was a Pittsburgh local that had like wandered into the bar, and I was just already overwhelmed with everything occurring in the bar, and I was like, this, you know, bar is just filled with drunk insanity, and now some random Pittsburgh guy is, you know, grabbing my ass. And I remember walking over to my boyfriend and being like, "That guy just grabbed my ass. Like, what's going on right now?" Like, everything was just such chaos and so much to take in, and I was sort of like just taken back, like, how is this reality and how are these things really occurring? and how are so many of these things occurring. I guess that gives a pretty good overview, right? So
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And again, go to the blog jaclynnmoskow.com. You can check out Joey Ingram's podcast, Poker Life podcast on YouTube. One of the things I did when I was watching you with Joe Ingram was try to put myself in your shoes, not as a woman, but as a poker fan. Now, I'm a poker junkie. I can only imagine if I'm invited to play on Poker Night in America, a show that I watch religiously. I would be very excited. This is like, hey, this is my poker moment. This is a big deal. And to get there and to experience that, I mean, that must have been so disheartening.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I was specifically excited because it was a cash game, and I'm purely a cash game player. And so, a lot of people, I guess they have those sorts of experiences that you're like alluding to having when maybe they register for a tournament and sit down next to one of these guys. And I'm not a tournament player. I don't follow particularly what goes on in that scene. I follow it as so much as it relates to cash games because when a big tournament comes in through town in Florida, the cash games tend to get good and there's more of them. But I was excited that this show was a cash game show because there really isn't a lot of cash games anymore. In 2016 highlighted on TV. There used to be shows where people were playing cash games, and now it seems like the heart of poker on television is coverage of the WSOP and the WPT and the handful of poker tournaments, and often the coverage I believe is towards the end when things are just. For me, I think it would probably be very boring and people would not want to watch those kinds of things and go wow, this really makes me want to go play poker. Whereas a cash game atmosphere is really different, and so I thought that was also a great reason to go onto the show because it was going to put kind of a different spin on poker and on another side of poker, which is cash game poker, which is what I do. So
the other thing too is that you forked out the money for this trip, right? You went down there on your own expense, which I come to understand that a lot of these guys, they get their flight and their hotel paid for.
Right. I guess it depends on how big your quote name is or your pull. A lot of the people there that I spoke to, almost all, everybody that I spoke to in Pittsburgh told me that they had that. That they had their expenses covered. I've had girls tell me that in, the Florida episode that wasn't the case for them, and then I've had some girls tell me in the Florida episode that was the case. So it seems to be a mixed thing.
So you get there, you're all excited to play, you've spent money to get there, you're thinking you're going to be on Poker Night in America for a long time, get some good airtime, and then everything just goes haywire for you. So you're there for the weekend, and you must be thinking, what's going on? Why did you wait so long, Jaclynn? A lot of people are saying, well, wait a minute, this happened in 2014, why now?
Right, I know. I mean, that's been a question that I've been asked dozens upon dozens of times. I can't give anybody a perfect response to that because there isn't one. Often the case with human emotion that you don't necessarily have a really rational or because again this is an emotional topic. I wasn't sure what to do. I just wasn't sure what to do. After it happened, I felt like one, if I were to just right away go on to the internet and say, look what happened to me, one, who's listening to me? Who's going to believe me? Who's going to do what has been happening in last week, which is come to the defense of Nolan and say, no. This guy's been in the industry for so long. There's been a lot of big names out there.
Let me read a few here real quick while we're on that topic. I know Daniel Negreanu went to Twitter, and of course, right. Kid Poker, one of the all-time best, if not the all-time best. He put out a few tweets. One, quote, I've known Nolan Dalla for 20 years and have never seen him act unprofessionally, let alone put his face in a player's breasts and motorboat. He also said, I've always experienced Nolan Dalla as a man of integrity, a class act with the players and customers at WSOP for decades. Nolan Dalla has been a social justice warrior before it was cool, standing up for human rights via his writings and his stand for people. And criminal accusations should be taken seriously, but it's equally important not to condemn the accused unless proven guilty. So yeah, you're right. There's been all
Yeah,
kinds
thanks
of
for the little tiny line disclaimer at the end of that Kid Poker. Right, go on.
I mean, for me to you, this took a lot of guts because you knew going in, doing this interview, writing this blog, that you were going up against quote unquote Nolan Dalla, and what you said yesterday was an old boys club.
Correct.
So that took a lot of guts. So you knew this was going to happen, and you went for it anyway.
I know, and I mean that's part of what took so long. There are a lot of other factors. I discussed a lot of them yesterday. I felt like I was in a position where, you know, possible career-related opportunities were at stake. I had been in communication with 888 Poker and a representative named Chris Capra. The first night we met, he made a statement to me saying that 888 Poker in New Jersey was looking for a second person to sponsor right now. They had been sponsoring, or continue to sponsor, Jessica Dolly as their, like, highlighted featured player, and he looks at me and he goes, a female doctor wouldn't be a bad choice. And so he puts this idea into my head that there's a possibility that we might have some sort of working relationship down the road. I had already agreed to do a show in Florida that was an all-female show. I've always been an advocate for getting more women into the game. It's a vastly under-tapped market. I saw some statistics that, like, I guess you're more of a tournament person than I am, but I guess the Colossus is a big tournament people talk about. Like, I think it was less than 5% were female that played last year, but it might have been less than 3%.
One of the stats that I'm aware of about women in poker, I was going to ask you this later, is that, 4 to 5%.
Yeah, so we're looking at similar numbers.
But the funny thing is, 4 to 5% of women play those events across the course of the WSOP, but they cash at like a 10 to 12% ratio. So they're good players. We need more women in poker, and I'm wondering your thoughts on, this story isn't going to help. I'm not saying you shouldn't come forward with it, but I'm just saying stories like this, I'm sure, are happening all the time at tables right across America.
Happening all the time. I play live cash for a living. I mean, so for years now, I've been sitting at tables, and it's rare that a day goes by that some sort of comment isn't either yelled at me from a player at another table or made to me by a player at the table that I'm playing at that, just would never be tolerated in any other environment. And I kind of said yesterday too on Joe Ingram's podcast that a lot of the times the people making these comments, that they're not the competent players. They're the players, not always, but a lot of the times they're the players that more skilled players at the table are extracting money from. And I get put in a spot where I feel like, okay, I'm just going to tolerate this because this is part of my job almost, is to sit here and to listen to obnoxious behavior because this person is dumping money, and there's a line, and it's one thing to endure comments, which is a whole other topic in and of itself. So it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's just another thing to have somebody stick their head into my chest, make a remark about how me being my religious background is of any way related to my attractiveness, and for the things that occurred on poker night to have occurred. They're just very, very different.
There's some people suggesting that, this was a drunken party atmosphere late at night at a bar and these kinds of things happen, but you're saying that this definitely crossed the line.
I don't think it in any ways excuses anything because we were all in a bar that somehow gives anybody a pass to behave this way. Yeah, it might give them the ammunition, but not necessarily a pass. Alcohol often, what's the expression I'm looking for? Liquid courage. But it certainly doesn't give anybody an excuse. But yes, the lines were definitely crossed.
You mentioned 5% of women playing the Colossus, and I interrupted you. What were you going to say about that?
I think it was something around 3 to 5%. My point was that women are such a vastly undertapped market in the poker industry, and everybody in the industry benefits from having more females play poker. And we were talking about some of my reasons that I didn't speak out right away. There were so many factors. One of them was that I really was looking forward to playing on this all-female event and contributing to promoting females playing poker. I had friends playing the event. I was looking forward to meeting some of the girls that I didn't know yet that were playing in the event. And I, of course, had very, very mixed feelings about ever being associated with the show again after what happened in Pittsburgh. But I had been in communication with somebody, you know, who had a huge role in the show, and he sort of was under the impression that things had been discussed with Nolan and Todd, that things were just going to be a lot smoother in Florida, that I was going to be treated differently. I was promised by multiple people that things were just going to sort of, quote, I was told by Nolan, quote, that this is prior to him touching me, but prior to him touching me, he told me, we didn't treat you right in Pittsburgh and we're going to make up for it in Florida. And I just wasn't sure what to do. I didn't feel that it was fair for me to miss out on an opportunity in the industry necessarily because of behavior of a handful of individuals. I also, you know, for a while was trying to tell myself, okay, you know, just get over it. It's not that big of a deal. You could laugh it off. You could make excuses like a lot of people have been doing for Nolan. The fact of the matter is, over time, it just continued to bother me more and more and more. And every time an episode aired and someone would come up to me and say, oh, I watched you on Poker Night last night. That must have been so cool to be on the show. And, you know, I rarely gave anybody a, you know, accurate response as to what it was like to be on the show. I would just be like, yeah, and try to change the topic, or, you know, it would just remind me, no, it wasn't what you think it was. Like, I did not have a positive experience on the show. And every time that people in the last year have been talking about women in poker, which has been such a popular topic on the internet and forums in poker, and every time those kinds of conversations have occurred, I've wanted to speak up and I've wanted to say, like, hey, I've got a story too. But I didn't, and I wasn't sure what was going to make me feel like things were rectified. And I let the show know that I wasn't going to be staying quiet anymore. And we started talking, and we talked about cash settlements, and we talked about maybe future appearances on the show. And then I made the decision that rather than proceed with any of that, I was just going to come forward and talk about what happened, because I felt like, you know, maybe on a selfish level it would be cathartic, and on a more, you know, on a grander scale, it was just the right thing to do. Like, I didn't want to compromise my integrity and keep my mouth shut over something that I think is a really, really important topic that needs to be discussed and that needs to be examined. And unfortunately, since posting my blog, my inbox is full. I mean, that's not the unfortunate part. I have a contact form on my website where you can contact me. The unfortunate part is that my inbox is full of stories from women saying, hey, I want to thank you for posting this, and I want to tell you about what happened to me. And then another story, and then another story. And after I went on Ingram's podcast yesterday, you know, I got another 24 emails, like, from women. You know, I haven't read them all yet. I've skimmed some of them. I'm going to eventually respond to each and every one, because I promised these women that I would, and that they could talk to me, and that I would come forward, you know, that I will discuss with any woman in the poker industry anything they want to regarding the topic of harassment. I've gotten an email from somebody that, you know, has been in the industry since the 70s and was telling me what it was like to, you know, be a female employed back then, in some very horror stories. I got an email saying, you know, a huge name that you know, I'm certainly not going to reference, had, you know, stuck his hand down a woman's pants and in an uninvited manner. I mean, I've been just getting flooded by stories, and it's really tragic and sad, and I don't know how we're going to take what happened and turn it into something positive. That's kind of something since going on the podcast yesterday, I've been asking myself, like, well, now what? Like, now what can we do? What can Poker Night do? What can the poker industry do? What can be done to make this something that doesn't deter women from coming into the game? Because that is the last thing that I want to come out of this, you know, is for women to go, okay, yeah, I have no desire to set foot in a poker room. You know, I think women are often a lot more comfortable playing maybe in a home game environment, because it's usually with friends or family or people that they know. And it can be intimidating sitting down in a casino, whether it's a cash game or a tournament, with unknowns. And again, I'm not a tournament player, but I have a feeling maybe this sort of harassment goes on a little bit more in the cash game world because it's a little bit less like structured, and there's...
Well, let me read you a couple of quotes from Twitter from two well-known female poker players, downright poker sharks, to be honest. Liv Marie put out a statement on her thoughts on the situation. She said, quote, "I've personally experienced misogyny on countless occasions within my time in the poker world, most of which I would consider mild, patronizing comments, etc. The way I deal with it now is very different to how I dealt with it when I was younger and less established. But whether it happens to a woman who sighs and ignores it or actively counters it, it doesn't make the comment or act any less annoying, offensive, or detrimental." And then Vanessa Selps, one of the best players in the world, period, she said on Twitter, pub service announcement: calling authenticity into question as a first response when someone finally comes out with a story of sexual abuse is not appropriate. It's fine to not believe, but by publicly debating and silencing someone immediately, in this case you, we perpetuate the reality that it's just better to stay silent. And then we have Bill Cosby. That's from Vanessa Selps. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I think both of those women are, incredibly intelligent women that are often very articulate and are well spoken and have a lot of things to say that are worth listening to. So I'm not surprised that both of them chimed in with things that I completely agree with.
Yeah, so Nolan Dalla's got a lot of support. You obviously have changed your opinion about him. You got a lot of support too. You get off the interview with Chicago Joey, then what happens? I mean, Twitter just went crazy. What was your day like yesterday and into today?
Yeah, it was hectic. It's been a hectic 24 hours. I've been, paying attention to my inbox. I've been getting a lot of requests for interviews. I've been, like I told you, been getting a lot of stories from women that wanted to talk about what happened to them. I've got a lot of positive feedback, and I've been trying to respond to those people and thank them. I've got friends sending me, screenshots of things because they know that I can't keep up with, every forum and everything that's going on, and kind of informing me of, I guess, what people are saying. I don't care, let alone have the time to read everyone's opinion on this, but I am trying to at least follow it because it's a story related to me, or maybe more accurately stated, a story that I started, or not started, but outed. And so, yeah, it's just been hectic.
Well, you've taken an important first step. But what do you say to people? I know there's at least one poker player who's active on Twitter who tweeted out today that he wants to write a mathematical theorem on why you're lying. I mean, some people have blatantly called you a liar, right? They've come out and called you...
that one yet. That's pretty funny.
They've come out and called you a liar. I mean, what does that feel like when... I can't see... First of all, I can't see why anyone would go public with this kind of story and lie about it. Some people are saying it's about money, but I just can't see it. But what do you think when people are just discrediting you right off the bat and calling you a liar?
That's on them. I mean, I can't relate to that because that's certainly not something that, is within my character to do. I don't know. Human behavior is a fascinating topic.
I'll just give you an example of what kind of tweets are out there. I saw a tweet questioning whether or not Chris Hansen said that the good thing about poker night in America is that there's no juice. In other words, no vig on the action. But you went back and clarified exactly what he said to you, right?
Oh, yeah, that's certainly not what he said. Yeah, no, I did go back and I went and I let him know that I was Jewish. And prior to letting him know I was Jewish, I said, hey, do you remember when you said the thing about that makes poker night so great is that there's no Jews? And he goes, yeah. And I just wanted to clarify that was what he said.
Another thing I find interesting is that in your blog, you stated that you have evidence. By the way, I got the sense yesterday that you were holding back. Do you have some more bombshell stuff that could come out?
Yeah, I mean, I have some stuff. There are so many emails, there are so many text messages. There's been stuff that people have sent me that I didn't know existed, that I'm not really sure what to make of. yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it at this point, other than I don't know what else will be released.
Before I forget, I also wanted to ask you, because in your blog post you sort of challenged them. You said, if anything I'm saying is wrong, come out and give your response. And it seems like, you mentioned Nolan has, but it seems like Chris and some other people, they haven't. It's pretty silent on the website of Poker Night in America.
Yeah, they're staying pretty quiet. Right before we recorded this, Poker Night released a statement, so I don't know if you saw that yet.
No, I didn't. What are they saying?
They're saying that, you could go pull it up right now. It's like 3 paragraphs maybe. And I kind of just responded to it really fast on Twitter because I immediately saw in it, like, an inaccuracy in it, so.
Let me see here. I'm scrolling down. On May 25th, 2016, Dr. Jaclynn Moskow made certain allegations involving former and current members of the Poker Night in America team from November 2014 on her blog. She subsequently appeared on an internet podcast to discuss the allegations. We take these allegations very seriously and have investigated Dr. Moskow's claims, including talking to the alleged witnesses over the past several months. To date, we've been unable to substantiate her allegations. Poker Night in America did offer Dr. Moskow the equivalent of 2 cash buy-ins plus travel expenses, with the possibility of her playing at future Poker Night in America events, since she had expressed an interest in doing so. Dr. Moskow responded by asking for $100,000 cash settlement, which we declined. At Poker Night in America, we have zero tolerance for harassment, discrimination, intimidation of any kind. We are proud of our track record of promoting women in poker, and we take that responsibility very seriously. We regret that Dr. Moskow had a negative experience with Poker Night in America, and we wish her the best in the future.
When I read that, the very first thing I thought was that wasn't what I was offered, and it's like, I don't know what, like, I'm not even sure why someone would write a post without first checking the facts, but I've now seen Nolan do it. I saw Matt Glantz do it, so I'm not surprised Todd did it. They offered me to come onto the show once. They said they would give me an appearance fee of $5K, so that's a one, not 2. And they said in that post, they're saying they were going to pay for my travel expenses, but what I was invited to play on was a show at Hard Rock, and I live in South Florida, so what travel expenses are there? So I just, like, saw that and just thought, all right, it's just, like, more inaccuracies.
Matt Glantz tweeted out today that you were asking for a $100K settlement. He then tweeted out that Dr. Jaclynn Moskow sent that $100K demand letter to HR, not to any lawyers, as far as I know. I wanted to clarify that for her benefit. What is your relationship with Matt Glantz?
I've never had bad blood between myself and Matt Glantz. I've never had any interactions with Matt Glantz that were negative. And in my initial blog post, he was one of the people that I listed that I had never done wrong by me, and that I, to my knowledge, aware that any of this occurred until recently. So he had said that, I guess he made some posts where he made like 4 points, I guess, that he thought were relevant prior to me going on Joey's show, and one of them was that I demanded $100K out of an attorney, and I just pointed out that it was inaccurate because I didn't talk to an attorney about $100K. Once the attorneys got involved, that was not part of our discussion. When I was discussing amounts, it was with HR, and it was when I was still considering taking money, and it was just, I thought that, him saying that I demanded $100K out of an attorney was an inaccurate statement, because it turns out it was an inaccurate statement. And he's since, I guess, clarified that didn't occur.
I wanted to ask you about Sean Deeb as well, because I did watch the interview that he did with Chicago Joey. He seemed pretty convincing that no, he never said that. That's not his character, that you were put up to it by a friend. What's your take on all of that?
It's absurd. It's absurd to think that after everything that happened to me in Pittsburgh, that I sat down and wrote this blog post, and then a friend chimed in and said, hey, I think you should add in a statement about Sean Deeb doing something. Let's craft something. That's preposterous. I included it merely because it occurred. I was recounting my tale of everything that occurred while I was in Pittsburgh that I found to be inappropriate, and my interaction with Sean Deeb was as stated. He informed me, like, he looked over at me and just was like, oh, females will always be inferior poker players. You're all too emotional. It's not the only thing that Sean's ever said to me or yelled across unprompted to me since I've known him. He's, during the same trip in Pittsburgh, yelled at me, oh, hey, seat stealer, like, as in I stole his seat or something when I was on the show. And in cases in Florida, when he's been in South Florida at Hard Rock and I've seen him, he's spewed things towards me, and I just ignored. Just like other people have witnessed Sean saying these sorts of things because they've told me this over the last few days, and I'm kind of just surprised at how many people are like, oh, that's so out of Sean Deeb's character, because from my understanding, it's not. But I can't speak to what Sean has done or said to other people. All I can speak to is what he has said to me, and that's one of the things he said to me.
What's your hope with all of this? I mean, like I say, I feel it took guts, a lot of guts to come out. You knew you were going to face some backlash. You certainly did. I know you've got some positive feedback as well. What is your hope with this? Are you hoping that this raises the issue, that more people pay attention to it, that more people stop saying these things, and that more women play poker? That's it?
I don't know. I've been asking myself that question all day, to tell you the truth. You asked me, what has it been like after going on Chicago Joey's show yesterday, and one of the things that happened afterwards is I went, all right, that's done, now what?
Was it a relief to be done, that interview?
Yeah, of course it's a relief. It's stressful. It's stressful talking about this topic, and it was stressful knowing that, as much as I wanted to say, like, I don't care what people say about me, I don't care what people think about me, like, I still had in the back of my head the thought that there were a ton of people tuning in, and they're sitting there staring at me, trying to discern, am I telling the truth, am I lying? And I mean, I shouldn't really be mocking that. We're poker players, right? We're supposed to be reading people. We're supposed to be good at that. But I certainly felt like, I was just putting myself out there to be judged, and I was. And I did it anyway, just to get the truth out there. I've been asking myself, is there something maybe that Poker Night can do to rectify this? Like, can they have a donation to maybe different charities during every event? Maybe the first one should be a women's shelter or something along those lines. I don't know. I don't know what's next, but I am hoping that somehow I can come up with some sort of idea to turn this into a positive, because it would be sad if what ends up occurring is just that women don't get even worse taste in their mouth about poker. As far as what ends up occurring to the individuals that I called out, that's not something I'm concerned with.
Well, I was going to ask you that, and this will be my last question. What is the latest with Nolan Dalla? I know Kate Hall, who has been on Poker Night in America a couple of times, she originally, after your interview, came out and said that she is now boycotting Poker Night in America. And then she recanted, saying that she understands that Nolan Dalla and Poker Night in America have parted ways, and that she has recanted her statement and now will play Poker Night in America again.
It was never my intent to destroy the show, and it was never my intent to discourage women from playing poker in any facet, whether it be at the WSOP, in a random cash game online, or on Poker Night in America, or on whatever other TV show there is. I just wanted the individuals that wronged me to be held accountable for their actions. And, I thought it was really awesome of Kate to come out and say that she was, no longer going to participate. And then, when she took it back, I thought that was completely acceptable and awesome too, because she had a valid reason, which was that she found out that Nolan was no longer involved in the show. So, yeah, I guess that probably answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Listen, I know you've been busy. I know you're tired. I know it's been a crazy 24 hours. It took a lot of guts, Jaclynn. I hope that this goes well for you, that you can advance women in poker. Who knows? Maybe 20 years down the road, you're the name. That's why it's 50-50. You never know. It took a lot of guts, and I
Thank
think
you.
more women should do it because I've definitely seen it firsthand. A lot of inappropriate comments at the poker table. Now let's face it, poker is war. You're trying to get underneath the other people's skins, put them on tilt, but some things
Sure.
do cross the line. So you're taking a stand. I wish you luck, and I wish you all the best with this. Maybe it's time to
Thank you.
lawyer up. All right, Dr. Jaclynn Moskow, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.